take a look at one of my favorite topics, which is build a cool spreadsheet powered diagram, Lucidchart. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And what I want to start with is how you might start to templatize this and kind of build out custom shapes so that this is something you can repeat over and over again. So the first thing that I've got here is I'm in a plain diagram here. I started with just a blank diagram and I did a couple things. I came in and I chose to mess with my page settings, so I turned off auto tiling so it'll just fit on one page. You can choose the page size. I just did it by 11. I also added just a really basic shape onto the canvas and styled it to become this header shape. But I did include some things like a dynamic field. So I inserted, the document name, page name, last modified date and time, and who did it. So I have this really smart header here that's going to be aware of certain things. And then I locked it onto the canvas with, size and position and style, but I left the content open in case I wanted to edit some things. Another thing I did was as I dragged out my shapes, I kind of set a nice default style. So I chose a color and a thickness of lines, and I right-clicked my shapes and said set default style. And I did the same thing on the line and said set default style for the line. What that means is, whenever I drag out just shapes here, they're going to match that style. Another thing that I've already set up in this template ready to go is I added my shape libraries. So when you can actually close out some of the standards here if you don't want them. And you can also come to the big plus shape library button and see everything that we've got here. Now you can also come in and add your own. So when you do this plus new library button, it'll create a new library. And when you come in, you could rename it. You can import maybe Visio stencils or SVGs. You can rename any custom shapes that you are making. You can even share it with team members so that they can use it when they come to use this template. So I have this shape library over here, and I'm now going to build a shape that will help me go from this spreadsheet to building out this diagram and keep it data powered. So as I go in to build, other types of diagrams or future diagrams, I could update or replace that data, and my process is kind of backed by that information. So first off, I'm just going to drag out let's just use the shape here. And then I'm going to link my data and information. So I'm going to use a Google Sheet. This works for CSV and Excel as well, or even feeding in data via our API. But I'm going to use Google Sheet for simplicity and for demonstrating. So I've added a couple columns here. A unique identifier in the form of step number. I've got some steps. I added a couple other data fields like assignee and maybe time in hours that it takes to do these steps. To link my data, I'm going to come to the data panel and I'm going to say link data. And I can then choose to import specifically my Google Sheet. So I'll come in and look for process information here, select. And what it's going to let me do is tell it, where's my header row and where's my unique identifier. You can use row number. I like to have a unique identifier as it makes it easier to keep the shapes maintained there. So I'm going to go ahead and link my shape. And I'm going to link this up by dragging and dropping the full row. So I grab from the row and I drop it on my shape. And now I'm going to play with this. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say the step itself should be displayed whenever I use this. And you'll notice here that I got this random icon that showed up. Well, one of the other things I've already built is a conditional formatting. Conditional formatting lets me select things like shape data and say, look at something like time. And then choose if it's not empty or if it's at a certain threshold, then I should add an icon, potentially something like a text badge where I could then pull in actually that same exact field if I wanted to, time, so that I get the number of hours or minutes here. And I can even add a custom hover message. So let me delete that one I was kind of mocking up and I'll show you the one that I'm actually using. This rule is saying if time is less than or equal to, in this case, 15, this was a rule I made earlier before I decided on hours. So maybe we're going to say if it's less than or equal to 3, then we're happy with it. Okay, so if it's less than or equal to 3, then we're going to put this text badge that'll show the number. And maybe let's add that hover text to say, maybe I'll actually insert the formula using this interpolated text. So I'll say equals this dot and then in double quotes time. So that's going to pull the time field and actually insert it here. Hours. And so now when I hover over that, it's actually going to tell me that it's 1 hour. So nice way to actually be able to add this to your diagram. Then I have an else if that's saying, okay, if it's greater than I think let's do 3. Less than or equal to 3. Yes. So if it's greater than 3, then that is going to turn red, and we probably want the same message. So equals this dot time hours. So this way, this rule is ready to go. And whenever I have a shape that has a certain number of hours, so I've got this one that's like 24 hours. If I were to link this one instead, you'll notice that it gets a red. So that's a conditional formatting rule that I've set up ahead of time in this template and is ready to go. And now what I've got here is I have a shape that is displaying what I want it to. And I'm going to go ahead and save that shape. So I'm just going to drag and drop it into library there. I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete this shape. Okay. And so the one final thing that I'm going to set up before I make this a template is actually this little time tracker here. So this little time tracker is, I can set it up to look at total time on the page as well as some expected time. The way I've done that is I went in and I searched for a dynamic shape in Lucid. And in this case, I used this little donut. And I also added a little text field here. And I selected both and I right-clicked them and chose to group them. Now, what that means is I can then add these properties sort of at the group level. And then I could reference them on the shapes inside. So in this case, it's property 1, which I might call expected time. And then I've got total time. Expected time for me, I'm just going to fill in based on what I want it to be. Total time is going to be all of the shapes on the page. So in this case, children of the page, specifically, I want their time property. So I'm going to use this dot notation in Lucid formulas. I'm going to wrap that whole thing in a sum, and that's going to give me the total time. Now inside, if I double click those shapes, I could actually reference those fields. So I could either add a property here, or again, I could just use that interpolated text. So I could say equals, and then it's going to let me reference parent. So the parent is the group because the shape is inside the group. And I'm going to grab that total time property, hit enter, and let's just indicate total hours, for example, is in this case 24. And then I'll grab my little thing here. My little donut, and I'm going to set the max to be parent dot expected time. It's got an equal sign, and then my value is going to be parent dot total time, and that's going to give me, as it'll tick up, how much that should be. Final thing, you'll notice too, I have another conditional formatting rule. This one is actually only going to be applied to the little donut. And it's using a formula instead of shape data, and it's checking if this dot value, so the shape's value, is greater than its max property, and if it does, it's turning it bright red. So we have a couple other conditional formatting rules here. I'm actually just going to delete the one that I made. I'm going to use my current one. I'm just going to update it to say 24 hours. So there we go. We have a smart little tracker. We have a dynamic header. We have the shape ready to go in our shape library, and it's expecting data from something called sheet 1, and it's ready to display, the step. And then it's also got kind of a time indicator here. And there's a lot of other things we could add. Maybe we want to track up by assignee. Maybe we want to get an average time, things like that. But I'm just going to go ahead and say this would be ready to go and convert to a template, and I could save it in that flowchart section. So let's say this was a template and we made our copy of it. So now I'm in a copy of the template. Let's pretend. Maybe I even set it in a draft status as I'm looking to build out this document. Well, whether or not I left the sheet there, I could come in and replace potentially this data set with another one that has the same step number, step, assignment, column titles if I needed to. But what I want to do still is just come to this data panel. I'm going to start dragging out shapes. And I'm going to switch from shapes in use to my custom shape library. In my case, it's called new library. What a wonderful name. And there it is. Oh, I chose the worst color. I chose gray that matches our UI. That's fun. So I'm going to choose the shape that I had chosen. And you'll notice, look at that. It's auto-populated with, get supplies. And so as I start to, drag out and draw these shapes, it's nice and easy for me to go ahead and add the next one. In fact, if I wanted to, because I maybe already know, that all of these are going to end up on the page, I could grab multiple at once, drag them all out, select that custom shape, and just start to map these kind of into the actual process. So once I have things ready to go, we will have our process. So I'm just going to here. Lucid is helping get these things aligned, which is great. And it's nice and easy to just get these lines all hooked up. So there we go. I have a nice little process here to go. You might notice too, not only is the time rule activating so I can see how many hours each of these is going to take, my total time is ticking up. And let's say I had an extra shape here that was going to be long. My little alert indicator is going to let me know, hey, this is not a super efficient process. So that's it. That's how you build kind of this data-backed process in Lucidchart. There's a lot of other features we could leverage. Maybe at the end, we want to link out to a different process, or maybe, this PCR step might be something that has a sub-process. So I could link to an entirely other Lucidchart document. I could take a look back at older versions and see what it looked like in the history of the document. I might even come in and shift the status around and make it something that's fully approved. If this process is, all set, we're happy with it, there's no changes. I could even add different layers onto the canvas and maybe toggle those with a shape action. So we have a lot of other advanced features here, but this is how you could get started building out sort of a data-backed process. And what's great about Lucid's data is that it always can be replaced, or in the case of Google Sheets and API ones, it can be refreshed. So let's say we found a way to, speed up some of these steps. So maybe we got a slightly faster method of getting this set up, and maybe we found a way to speed this one up so we can do this a little bit faster. Maybe we found a way to make this automated, for example. And so I might take some of this information, now that it's updated, I could refresh my data set and I would see certain things change here. So I might see an update to how long that dropped from 2 to 1, that dropped from 3 to 2. The assignee here is different, which I had ever chosen to kind of mark those as different. I would be able to differentiate it there. Like if I had a different color for the assignees, I would have seen that change to purple because it's automated instead of gray because it's the lab tech. So we'd have a lot of different ways to kind of highlight that using the formatting that could look into this data. And of course, it's very easy to maybe go share this out with your team. One final thing to note, sometimes it is nice to be able to pull the information about the process so that you could put it into some bigger analysis here. I can always come in and export this out to potentially a CSV of shaped data, or if I needed to just kind of grab the information, I could actually use our document contents API, which would even access potentially the linked data that's attached to a shape if we needed to pull down what was fed in from the Google Sheet as well, so that we could maybe run an analysis on all of our data-backed processes. And finally, you can build some really cool things doing stuff like this in Lucid. So here's a much bigger built-out document that in this case is, there's a lot of cool rules here indicating, some things actually, it's gone from the sheet. It's no longer something we're doing. So we know that we should and remove that. Here's one that was updated recently as recorded in the data. We've got some other rules indicating, where something is located. There's multiple inserted fields that are coming from the data in these shapes. So it's a little more complex than the previous one. And, if I have a rule here, it's actually telling me that I should be connected to one additional system because it's missing a line. So there's some really powerful things we can do here in Lucid data. And hopefully this is helpful to learn a little bit about that.